slow regulate or leave it alone, appropriate segue, rising to the AI challenge. How much should we interfere with the progress and how much should we regulate? That's really the question here. Panel?
Thank you, everybody, for coming together for this great conversation. A special thanks to James Conley, Dan Brown, and of course Bruce Berman, and the CIPU team and the Kellogg team. We've been asked today, this morning on this panel, to talk about AI and IP, and think about the legal rules. Why don't I take that and I'll start put it on? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. I will now sit down. Our panel is going to explore some of the ways in which the legal system interacts with both formal IP and AI. We have a great group. We have Armando Pauker, who is in the venture capital business.
The only person without a suit here.
A businessman at a business school. We have Daniel Papst from Papst Licensing. Armando and Daniel bring a lot to bear from the business community. Jerry Ma, who is currently in the government at the Patent Office, Director of Emerging Technologies. Daniel Papst Licensing, transacting over IP. Why don't we take, and my name is Scott Kieff. I'm a law professor at GW in Washington, D.C., and have been a practitioner and been in government as well. Let me start with Armando. Can you tell us, as you think about, you do a lot of work with AI in the healthcare sector. You approach these ideas from the VC perspective. Is IP a big part of your team's thinking when you think from the VC perspective?
No. So from a venture perspective, when we look at deals, so just a little background is, we are a seed stage venture capital fund, and we're based in Chicago, and we focus solely on enterprise software applications of AI. So when we look at a seed stage deal, IP, in the terms of the way you think about it, as something patentable or something like that is immutable, is not really kind of like one of the first things. If we had a top 10 list, it would be number 11 on that top 10 list. Because what we know is from a software, because we only invest in software, from a software perspective, basically everything could eventually be reconstituted. Everything could eventually be re-engineered if you really had the time and the effort and all that. So when we look at AI, for example, we don't see differentiation in the models. We see the models as being just commodities. We see value in the data, but not in having a lot of data. It's having the right data. It's having proprietary data that solves a specific problem.
So the provenance of the data is important to you.
Correct. And so that would be important for healthcare. If, for example, if we're looking at a deal, if you're looking at something that's a seed stage deal, where did they get the data? Do they have a data set that is important and bearing and fruitful for that problem that they're trying to solve?
And can you just explain for the group, colloquially, as lay people, we might experience AI with some of the images that we saw already today. How would you characterize the risks that you're managing when you try to get better control over provenance of the data? Are you worried about the hallucination problem? Are you worried about the exaggeration problem? What is it about the end result that you're trying to avoid by, on the front end, managing provenance?
So hallucinations and what you described is only a problem in LLMs. So as Alex described, if you look at AI, it is like a list of maybe 10, 15, 20 different kind of approaches on how to deal with data, of which only one of them is the LLMs and the generative stuff. That's the only one that really suffers from the hallucinations. All the other ones don't. So there's many different ways around a problem, and it's not just the hallucination. Hallucination is not, hallucination is only important in certain applications. And so then you have to understand how to use the LLMs if you're using that in that application. But in general, the provenance of the data is really, really important, only in the context of, does that data set help you solve a problem? If it doesn't really help you solve that problem, it's not that useful.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
It's only in the context. We look at it from an investment perspective of, this company is trying to start to solve a problem. And AI is a tool to solve that problem, one of many. And in order to use that, remember we look at it as the models are commoditized. So no value in the model, but there's value in the data and how that company solves that problem. So for us, the moat is, so there's a new thought that there's different ways that a company can differentiate. You can differentiate on technology, you can differentiate on workflows, you can differentiate on go-to-market, you can differentiate in UI, and many different ways. If you're differentiating only on technology, that is not a sustainable moat, because technology kind of moves, and then you kind of get stuck. But if you're able to have workflows that use a specific technology, the workflows themselves are not what you would call IP, but workflows have to do with your understanding of the industry and your ability to create a solution for a specific problem.
So your strategy is to find types of data that you believe are going to be especially helpful to medical problems, and then arrange business models that use algorithms that you're not terribly differentiating.
That's right.
And you're going to differentiate on the margin around your data.
The data is an enabler.
Yes.
Right, at the end of the day, to solve that specific workflow and that specific problem.
And evidently, it's working well for you.
Yeah, it's great.
So that's wonderful.
It's very hard. Very hard to get, and there's many examples of data sets, and the more somebody can create their own data set and have a way of doing that, that incurs value.
Now, one of the questions maybe we can all keep in mind as we shift the conversation down to Daniel Papst, and we'll start to get you ready to talk about how you're experiencing AI and IP as you would like to discuss. But as we get ready to make the shift, maybe just leave us all with an open question. The question that comes up for me whenever I hear somebody talking about their business model, I start to have in my mind an image. I live and work in Washington, D.C., and we have a street corner just north of DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C., where we've got on this corner 3, let's just call them establishments. One, this has all changed a little bit after COVID, but right before COVID. One, you would pay some money. They'd pour you a beverage. The price they charged was nominally the price of the beverage. The brand you may have heard of, it's called Starbucks. But you'd find a lot of people doing what we're doing. They sat together, maybe they sat near each other, but 1 seat apart, and they had laptops open, but they weren't paying for the seat. The cash register said they were paying for the coffee. Well, right across the street, there was a place where you paid for the seat, but the coffee was nominally free. But it looked just the same. And then in between, there was the place where you paid for the food and only a little bit for the coffee and nothing for the seat. It was a restaurant, Sete Osteria. It's a Cove, Starbucks, Sete. Okay. But there are 3 business models that nominally charge for totally different things, but as human beings, we're buying a bundle, we're enjoying the bundle, and the brands are managing to different components in the bundle. And of course, they are each going to maximize with their business strategy. And of course, in Washington, you got to, whenever someone talks about business strategy, this is what we hear: lobbying strategy. Right? They're just going to write the rules for, let's call it AI reg or IP, that are going to maximize their ability to charge for the things they sell and minimize their obligation to pay for the things they buy. And as a profit maximizer, they like to pay a little and sell a lot. But from a social planning perspective, it's not clear that there's actually a difference among those 3 things. But opportunistically, if we change the rules of the game along the way, some people can really become big winners and others can find themselves behind the 8 ball. But one of the things we always want to keep in mind is how we're shaping these legal systems and how businesses and investors are adapting to them. Daniel, can you tell us how you do IP licensing and how IP and AI work for you in your business?
I'm happy to. Thank you very much. Thanks, Bruce, for having us all here. So perhaps licensing is really more a patent monetization business, focusing on patents. Yes, there is some AI connection every here and then, but usually these days those are patents that you are a little hesitant given current legislation in the US, but also current Supreme Court decisions that made an impact in that field. So we actually started also looking into earlier stage investments, a little bit like my colleague on the right, and an entity that we're invested in that are actually producing their own data for a product that really tries to scan tissue in the OR while identifying if all the cancer tissue has actually been cut out, put it on a little scanner, shoot some laser beams on there, and then in real time identify without having to bring it, freeze it, bring it over to some other lab to get in real time the information. Yes, we cut all the corners out, and they're using AI to identify, and through pattern recognition, identify, is this still cancerous tissue on this very flat part sample that they put on their scanner. And I agree that you have to get data, and can you buy that data? Can you do you have to get that data yourself through samples? And with medical data, things are always a little dicey, at least a little more so in the European Union than maybe in the US. And so maybe I'll switch a little bit towards what you alluded to, the regulatory framework that we're all living in or dealing with, which in the US, which I guess you could say, given the current litigations that are happening from content creators that try to get verdicts that say, you know what, OpenAI, if you use my data to train, you have to ask me, or you have to pay me for it, or I might just say, you know what, I don't want you to use my data to train your machine. That is actually something that came about in the European Union on March 13th, while it is a book of 459 pages of regulations, and they're still working on a little bit of the wording, so it's not law yet. It's supposed to be published in May to June. There is a focus on what does a content provider have to accept, deal with, and the basically through-going red line is that if you want to train your system with data, you have to ask the respective content provider if you're allowed to use that data, and to basically get written feedback. Yes, you like a positive feedback. Yes, I agree with you using my data. That sounds like there will be probably quite a bit of litigation over that and what that exactly means. But the European Union, I guess, tried to, arguably being a little bit on the backside of not so much the forefront of AI technology, which appears to be happening much more so in the US, maybe because people expect not so much regulation here, or not as quick regulation, but also with respect to existing data protection laws in the European Union versus in the US, that there is, that there will be quite a difference in Europe. The funny thing is that the European regulation actually tries to be extraterritorial here. They say, we don't care where you're training your data, if it's in Mongolia or in Indonesia or in Australia or wherever, you still have to disclose which data you were using to train your system, and
And show that you got permission.
show that you got permission, and you can, as a content provider, at least that's the idea, you can opt out. You can say, I am this poet, I don't want any AI machine to ever train with my poetry to later say, I want a Dan Papst style sonnet being made. So and there'll probably be lots of headwind. I'm surprised that they got this through, and there was, I'm sure, a lot of lobbying, and there will be a lot of lobbying to impact this, but for now, this is where the path is going to go. It will take 2 years until it's going to be really in effect as law, so everyone's probably like, oh, we got this ticking clock, getting it done within the next 2 years, and then after, we're like, oh, we're pulling out or trying to pull out of Europe, but I don't know.
So one of the things we're seeing is that there's a dynamism, as we think about Armando's discussion, a dynamic decision-making that he and his colleagues engage in, where they try to strategize with each other about what are the legal rules, where are the business leverage points, and we're going to make choices about how we're going to make our investments given those exogenous factors for our calculus. And then Daniel's describing a different dynamism, which is he's highlighting that there are some significant differences in the legal systems as you look across these national or geographic borders. So you've got some differences around, let's call it, AI regulation, and then you've got some differences around, let's call it, IP enforcement. And in an odd way, they're almost upside down or inversions of each other. So just to be pretty specific, to highlight, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I think you were mentioning is that the US patent system right now is structured in a way in which it's just really quite hard to enforce patents. So you and your colleagues don't make an investment decision to put a patent focus inside the US market with respect to patents. You're focusing on, for example, the German system, the Dutch system, the EU and the UPC systems, and by the way, the Japanese systems and the Korean systems. Interestingly enough, they are currently enforcing patents, especially relating to computer systems and software, while the US right now is basically not, just period, it's just not. And then the inverse, the European regulations on use of AI, a much heavier hand of regulation than the US system. And so as an investor, your team and your colleagues and the business folks you're working with, you're aware that actually you may have an easier time structuring some of the legal aspects of those affairs within the current US AI reg system than, for example, the EU AI reg system. But then, of course, this makes it tricky. And again, just to get back to the lobbying, our US shift around patents really had a very visible change with the 2011 change to our patent statute. It was the biggest statutory change in the US system since the 1952 Patent Act. But just because, again, in the Beltway, we often talk about lobbying, in 2011, a successful presidential campaign was around $1 billion operation, right? It's about $1 billion. These days, it's noticeably more than that, but in 2008, that was around $1 billion. The 2011 Lobbying Disclosure Act disclosed spend of the lobbying dollars spent to lobby the 2011 America Invents Act change to the patent system, which, by the way, was pushed for many, many years, and by the way, went into effect early in 2011. It wasn't even a 12-month year. It was signed by the president in September, but Congress was done with it by June. So it's either a 6 or a 9-month year, depending on how you want to count it. But the LDA spend for lobbying dollars on just the patent system, just in the US, just in that year, $1 billion. $1 billion. So that means there's not a political campaign on the left or the right or the independent left or the independent right or the far left or the far right. There's not a one that can avoid saying, hey, I care about patents after that, because that's proof of concept. That's proof that if you get in the patent policy business as a part of the US political system where lobbying is allowed and campaign finance is allowed and required, which, by the way, is the entire US political system, then you're out of business. You can't win if you don't say, I care about patent policy. Because you need that bill. You need that billion. Let's talk about how the government, how the patent system, recognizing how big this business is. It's a big business. Roughly, the Patent Office, we regulate in the United States the largest capital market in the history of human existence, mostly through the Securities and Exchange Commission. But we have a much bigger regulatory or somewhat regulatory part of the US government. It's about twice the size of the SEC. It's the Patent Office. What does the Patent Office do around AI and IP? What would you like to tell us about how you folks are facilitating these markets for these activities?
Sure thing. So thanks, Scott, as well as my co-panelists, Dan and Armando. I'll preface this by saying that politics and lobbying is above my pay grade, so I'm not going to venture into those areas, at least as long as I'm still sane. But I will give some thoughts responsive to your question of what the PTO is doing in the area of AI. Before I do that, however, I'd like to give a very brief primer as to the underlying AI technologies and modalities of data use that are going to sort of implicate not only our present discussion, but all the discussions that we'll have today. I think those will be important in terms of just grounding or discussing in the technical realities and the facts on the ground of how AI is actually happening out there. I'll also give a prefatory note that I'm a economist by training, an AI researcher by experience, and a patent practitioner by accident. So this is all to say I don't really come from a single disciplinary background. I say this to give another proviso that a lot of what I will say is going to be animated not only by IP law considerations or purely technical considerations, but it's going to be a weird sort of unholy mix of sort of all of the above. So apologize in advance. Hope you all can bear with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions if folks get mixed up toward the end of our discussion today. So moving on to the modalities of AI, I'd just like to very briefly set the table stakes for what it is we're discussing today. AI has not been, AI didn't suddenly emerge out of the floor in late 2022 with these chatbots, right? AI has been decades-long venture, as far as as far back as and even before the first computers were invented and built. So we see generative AI today as sort of the most prominent modality of AI. Before we get to generative AI, there were two sort of precursor modalities that are still in very active use today that I want to at least cover and enumerate. So we have descriptive AI and predictive AI to complement the generative AI modality that's all the rage these days. So what is descriptive AI? Descriptive AI is all about pattern detection and pattern mining. So without any human input, without any human provided labels, we want to automatically extract patterns from data. That's been done since the very earliest stages of AI research, because back in the day, we didn't have large armies of human raters to curate these massive data sets, right? We didn't have these billion-dollar companies able to employ thousands of contractors, thousands of sort of domain specialists to create the sort of very curated data sets that Armando was alluding to, that these days, I think you rightly point out, provide a lot of competitive advantages for companies with that data. Back in the day, it was just data in a very uncurated, unfiltered, unstructured form, and the baby steps of AI, as it were, was to figure out what patterns are extractable from that sort of, I won't say ill-formed, but very messy sources of data, and still extract some machine intelligence out of it. Then, turn of the century, heading into the early and mid 2000s, we see the emergence of really powerful predictive AI methods. So with the birth of the internet, with the birth of large-scale internet companies, we suddenly did start to get a lot of well-structured, rich, and most importantly, very high-frequency data around things like what do people click on in search engines, in the advertising space, what ads are folks most interested in, and it should be no secret to anyone here that those are very big markets. Those are billion-dollar, tens of billions of dollar markets, and the proliferation of structured data with labels either human created or implicitly provided, for example, by users of a website interacting with the website, that gave rise to what I'll call the era of large-scale predictive AI. And that, believe it or not, was the genesis of today's generative AI boom. Because what is generative AI? What are these large language models? Some of you might already know this, but for those who aren't aware, the way these large language models work is you start with either nothing or you start with a prompt. For example, when you go to ChatGPT or your favorite chatbot, you feed in sort of your first message, whatever the case may be. The model takes that as input, and then its task is not to sort of generate the whole response in one go. Its task is to predict the single next word that follows that input. So, who's the current president? It's not predicting the sentence, Joe Biden is the current president of the United States. It's predicting one word, perhaps Joe. And then it feeds that word back into the model and runs that prediction all over again. So who's the current president, Joe? And then now you rerun the AI model and you ask the next word. And that might be Biden, probably would be Biden with very high probability. And you do that over and over again. So what is generative AI? It's not some magic unicorn that just came out of nowhere. It is the repeated application of predictive AI techniques that were honed over the past, I'll say, 2.5 decades, to such a point where it now is able to process the very complex, and I forget who mentioned this, I believe it's actually the speaker prior to this panel, but the multimodal inputs that are all the rage these days and that are the subject of generative AI investment, generative AI research, and the whole work. So the arc of AI innovation isn't a story of just things coming out of nowhere and sort of coming to the forefront. Although it may seem like that, it's actually a very meticulous story of going from descriptive AI, pattern matching, to taking baby steps with predictive AI, taking these predictive AI models and giving them more compute, more data, more powerful algorithms, step by step by step, until in the year 2022, the ingredients are all in place to make things like ChatGPT, to make large language models possible with repeated application of predictive techniques. So I mentioned this, all to set the stage for how we think about AI and IP in the current era, and how we think about it isn't materially different at a high level from how we think about technology in general, sort of machine learning technology in the days before the current AI hype cycle. It's really about taking a step back, seeing what are the concrete inputs into this technology, what are the modes of using the technology, and then sort of working backwards to figure out what it is we should be doing from a policy standpoint. So AI in this day and age, safe to say, implicates all modalities of intellectual property. And with apologies to Armando, I'm going to gently push back on the assertion that IP is not relevant or not important even for data-intensive industries, even when the data is the differentiator. Because
I think he was just saying for his particular strategy, they're making a choice.
Well, yeah, maybe, but you're not. You have to look at a seed stage investment. We're talking about. I think that there's different life cycles in a company. If you look at a seed stage investment, you're looking at you look at a seed stage company. There's 2 or 3 people. They don't have the funds to even do an IP search, right? They don't have that. So at that point of that formative time of the company, they're trying to just figure out where's the problem? How can I solve that? How am I going to do that? And then they're trying to find a moat. The IP part may be important in the future, in the far, far future. If they succeed, if they can get customers, if they can get funding, There's so many things that you have to worry about that the last thing that they're going to worry about is their IP strategy.
And I'm just curious, Jerry, can you connect up to the patent operation process? So presumably the patent office, at least in the US, at least for now, is still primarily focused on assessing only one category of questions that arise in a patent context, and that's the validity question. Patent office doesn't do infringement, it doesn't do damages, it doesn't assess other remedies like injunctions or exclusion orders. It's just deciding the validity question. And the validity question usually boils down to, roughly speaking, two categories. One is the so-called prior art, and the other is the so-called disclosure or text of the patent. For the prior art question, I take it these examiners are not testifying under oath the way somebody does in a traffic accident. On June 7th, 8 years ago, I saw the red car go through the red light. They're saying something else. People of ordinary skill in this particular art at that particular time had within their capacity this particular technical toolkit. How is AI helping with that inquiry?
Good question. I'll, before I get to that question, just one final remark on Armando's comment. I think you're very right that formal considerations of IP probably aren't popping up in any sort of early stage ventures, minds, to any significant degree. But when you talk about the moat and data being the moat, well, that data is IP. It might not be formally registered anywhere in the archives, the PTO, or the Copyright Office, but to the extent you're keeping that data close hold to your company, well, that's a trade secret, and the decision to keep it that way is a deliberate decision. You might not think of it as a formal decision you're making, but it is a modality of IP that we should all be thinking of. When we're keeping a proprietary data set close hold, that's not just just some mountain of bits and bytes. That is a form of IP in and of itself. So I think IP globally and from a holistic standpoint infects really every stage of an AI-based venture. And I just want to emphasize that point, and happy to discuss later. To your question about how AI is directly assisting with some of these very, very complex determinations that the PTO and our adjudicators make on a day-to-day basis, we think about AI in terms of, and this is valid on both the policy and technology fronts. I think we're addressing the technology front now. Across both these fronts, we think about our AI work in terms of a human-centered approach. So what this means is when it comes to technology, we don't think about replacing the discretion and judgment of our human adjudicators, our examiners, our APJs, and such. We think about empowering them, augmenting their work with the appropriate context, the insights, and especially in this day and age where sort of information overload really defines all, most if not all professional work, help them sift through the information and find needles in haystacks. Now, why is AI a part of this story at all? It's because in this day and age, the way that an idea, a technical concept might be expressed doesn't follow any specific pattern. We have things drafted in patent, what we might call patentese, but that's not I'll just say on behalf of all the practitioners, patentese usually isn't what we would view as a natural way of expressing ideas, right? And in scientific papers, ideas and concepts might be expressed a whole different way. And how do you marry these together? How do you help the examiner draw a connection between a claim that might be drafted in, claim patentese and connect the dots to a piece of prior art that might be disclosed in a white paper or a blog post, or even in this day and age, computer code, which is a valid form of prior art. If you go on github.com and just find a repository, a source code repository, guess what? That's prior art. How do we connect the dots? We try to get at the underlying semantic meaning of content in any modality expressed in any of these many repositories of prior art. AI helps us create these underlying semantic representations of concepts and content, and then helps our examiners connect the dots in that underlying semantic representation space. So for the technologists in the room, you're all well aware of embeddings, right? Embeddings are a key component of how we use AI to navigate. I'm not sure if that's a timer, that's my time's up bell or anything. But I was just say, we use these embeddings, these mathematical representations of documents, of paragraphs within documents, of individual sentences and words to do precisely what I said, help examiners, help adjudicators, help personnel and our stakeholders across the PTO to make those connections, to figure out that this table recited in patentees corresponds to a layman's description of a table in a trade magazine, or even a picture of a table posted in somewhere you can find in Google image search. So that's translating between different modalities of expression and of content is one of the foremost ways that we think about the value of AI in the operational space. I could go on and on about what we're doing in policy space as well, but in the interest of time, I'll cede the floor back to Scott.
Well, I wonder, let's give an opportunity for you each, perhaps to ask one or two of the others, or to offer a suggestion to one or two of the others. I'm curious, maybe we'll start with you, Armando, and any questions for Daniel or Jerry about what they've told you about their approach to these issues, or any suggestions based on your approach to these issues. And then we'll go out to the audience as well. So please, audience members, I'll start taking the cue. Just raise your hands. I'll take the cue. In the meantime, Armando, so I've got you in the queue, but go ahead, Armando.
Yeah, I'm just curious from both of you, is when you see these patents, the AI patents, who are the generators? Is it big tech? Is it a big company, or do you see small companies doing that?
From my perspective, there's both. There's startups and fairly tiny entities that bring new technology through the patent offices.
I meant like software, AI kind of people. I see there's a lot of individual inventors who are just patent machines, but from in this space.
No, that's what I've been referring to in the AI software space, and of course there's the big guys. I think IBM is still pretty far ahead. Interestingly, OpenAI, they don't have all that many patents. Yes, now they teamed up, or not now, but they've teamed up a while back with Microsoft. They obviously have a bigger portfolio on all sorts of technologies. I'm not sure how much there had been focused on AI patents, so to say, but so I guess there's a little bit of both.
And I'm curious, do you have a question or a comment that you want to make on either what Armando or Jerry has offered?
I'm curious if the tools that Jerry and his team use at the USPTO, are they offered to the public, so to say, for doing their searches on prior art, or is that something that is just for internal use?
Internal or also external?
That's a great question. So we do have certain forms of our AI technology deployed out in the wild for our customers' benefit. We have in beta, a inventor search assistant that is a version of certain AI technology that is being used within the patent office, released in beta mode to the public. I can't recite the URL off the top of my head, but if you search inventor search assistant, you'll be able to find the tool I'm talking about. That isn't the comprehensive AI search solution that we offer internally to our examiners. There are ongoing discussions, constantly about what timelines and resourcing needs might look like in terms of bringing that to the fore, to the public. And we're definitely very committed to, as much as budgetary constraints and legal constraints allow, delivering that technology not only to our internal stakeholders, but broadly across the IP ecosystem. So it's a work in progress, where we have certain things out there. We're always looking to expand that footprint of public AI tools. We also, I'll just mention, we have some tools that are exclusively available to the public. So they're not internal tools. They're exclusively customer-facing, customer service tools. We have beta versions of virtual assistants on our website now that you can use, especially if you're an independent inventor or sort of small-time entrepreneur and just starting to navigate the IP ecosystem. We have these chatbots that will now help you, these virtual assistants that will now help you navigate both the site structure as well as the underlying concepts of what is a patent, what is a trademark, what is an office action, what is a step to respond to given notice or mailing I get from the PTO, so on and so forth. And that's something that we really believe in, using AI to help independent inventors. So these are what we think of as our sort of small and micro entity constituencies navigate a system that otherwise can seem very intimidating without the professional help that a lot of folks in this room provide on a day-to-day basis. That's certainly super valuable help. We realize that not every outfit just getting started can afford that help or otherwise procure that help. So we're trying to fill in the gap, especially for the self-represented and underrepresented constituencies that we're equally committed to serving.
A very, very brief question or comment for the other panelists?
So I think one of the key things that we try to do at the PTO that we realize we can do a better job of always is talking not only to the usual constituencies that tend to come before the PTO and offer ideas, but to expand our cone of outreach and our cone of who we listen to when thinking about some of these thorny questions, especially surrounding AI and emerging technology. So the question I direct to either or both of you is, what do y'all see as the next thing on the horizon, either with AI generally or in the context of your specific fields, medical AI or licensing, that you think the PTO should be aware of when we think about preparing for the next step ahead, the next transformation in AI, and ultimately the next decade, few decades horizon?
And then we have three so far audience members who want to participate. So maybe let's
leave at least 5 minutes for questions.
So let's maybe just super short responses to that. Armando, do you have a specific suggestion?
I think that in the next several years, what we're going to see is the rise of multi-agent systems and co-pilots, which you're starting to work on. But what we don't have is but all of these are within one company. Today's multi-agent systems, today's co-pilots. We don't have the ability of a co-pilot from company A to speak to the co-pilot of company B. That infrastructure does not exist today. And I think that infrastructure will have to be developed as we go forward.
Please, Daniel.
I would love to know what's happening in the next 5 to 10 years in that field. If I did, I'd probably try to come up with some inventions around that and may seek patent protection, hoping that it'll work out ultimately. But I really think that the aspects that are still not solved, can AI itself become an inventor? Currently, there's pushback on that, but when does it start to become my invention? Am I just the human signing the thing? But in the end, I've fed the machine a lot of cues, and in the end, came up with a very nice description and decent claims, and have been able to come up with something out of the vast prior art pools that are there. So I think that's a challenge that has to be addressed and will be coming our way.
So great. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. Let's start here over on the right, the gentleman in the maroon blazer.
Good morning. Oh, sorry. Good morning. My question is to Jerry. And Jerry, I heard you say something. I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, but it sounded like it made sense. You were saying something about and one of the strategies that you can use to protect your IP that's generated by AI would be could possibly be trademark. I'm not trademark. Trade secrets. Did I hear you correctly on that?
Yes, and in fact, many of the largest players in AI have decided to maintain a lot of the secret sauce that powers their models or the training of their models precisely as trade secrets.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
So we have another question here in the middle, then one a little bit further back, then on the right, and then on the left. We'll see if we have time, everyone, and then over here. We'll try to keep this as a lightning round.
We'll have brief answers.
Sorry.
Thank you. My name is Frank. I'm a patent lawyer before USPTO for many years. So this question for Jerry Ma. For me, doing a lot of office action rejection responses. I saw, some office actions are good, some are not good. I can see maybe patent office use a lot of AI, doing a keyword search, finding, prior art, some similar, some are not. And, with AI development, are we gonna replace, 8,000 examiners in the future? Just use machine to automatically send out 102 rejection or 103 rejection or, even 101 rejection, Is that gonna happen?
So this sounds like one of the general skepticisms we hear about about AI in all contexts. We hear, especially in the context of dealing with a government official inside an office, if it's frustrating to call the cable company and deal with their AI chatbot, if it's frustrating to click on Microsoft's paperclip, it can be even more frustrating when your patent examiner is speaking AI back at you, and you want it to be a more rewarding interaction. But let's maybe gather up a few questions, and then we'll have some time for a response from each one of you. Please.
I'll try to keep it fairly quick. I think this is probably for Daniel. In regards to the European kind of regulation that's happening with AI, they were kind of pushing, with the data protection, with the right to erase. Is that going to be there for the content providers that say no and someone uses it? Or is it even possible to erase once trained in AI? I don't know if that's a technical or regulatory question, but can you erase from trained AI?
All right. Well, let's hold that. Let's
I'll answer that. No.
Yeah. And we have towards
We
the
have to just
back and then
return to
towards
Bob.
the front, and then I'm sorry, we're going to run out of time. So this will be our last over here on the right. So please.
Yeah, I wanted to know, in the previous century, I believe, patents really helped inventors kind of capture the value they were creating. But recently, especially in the app and tech space, most of this incentive was provided by VCs, where they kind of weren't looking at the most innovative solutions, but they were like, okay, can you reach product market fit and really scale quickly? So you see different incentives driving different behaviors. So I was wondering, for the generation of AI, what is the ideal behavior you're looking for in future inventors and creators, and how regulation can incentivize such ideal behaviors in the future?
Thank you. And then we'll bring the microphone right up front, and then we'll run over to the far side here. And then as we collect these last two questions, maybe each of you could start to think about just a one-sentence wrap-up, and then that will cover our time. Please.
Okay.
Am I on? Yeah. Thank you for allowing me to ask the question for Jerry, who's on the hot seat here a little bit. And you did ask the question about guidance for you and the Patent and Trademark Office in sort of the management of IP around these issues. I wanted to point out that my companies generate systems that develop data uniquely that feeds AI. So in a way, we own the data source, and there's a lot of physics and engineering around that. We apply for a lot of patents, and of course, everybody who has experience with claims rejection. Once the patent is under examination, you get a wave of rejected claims. And in several cases, we realized that rather than fighting this rejection issue with the examiner, it may be that the examiner needs to be educated. And so we instead called the supervisor and asked if we could come to the Patent and Trademark Office and deliver a lecture. And those lectures included 30 examiners. We did this twice and pretty much solved the problem to put everybody on the same plane of education in evaluating claims validity around these kinds of patents. So that's one way a company can provide guidance to the USPTO. Just have a seminar.
Thank you, and then we'll wrap up with our last question here.
I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you very much. My name is Kieff. So my question is to Mr. Pauker. When you, so we're slow, regulate, or leave it alone is the topic of discussion. When I think about the business of science, the business of medicine, help me understand a little bit about regulation. If I came to you and wanted to pitch a AI, large language model, to help clinicians understand a myriad of different data sets. And I'm not scraping them. I know the problem, understand the solution I want to build. And I don't know where my IP is. How do you feel about regulation? And I mean FDA, regulation, quality review.
I'll answer that quickly. I think that we have to comply with existing laws. There's no way around it. So if the solution that is being done for FDA requires FDA approval, you have to get the FDA approval. And that is kind of like table stakes.
And do you think the FDA is going to regulate some of these tools?
If it's so there's a difference between if it's an assessment or a diagnostic, or if it's a diagnostic and it's if it gives you a go, no go on a patient, for sure FDA is going to approve that, even if it's a software medical device. So if it's an assessment, you can go through a different FDA process.
So Daniel and then Jerry.
We have 1 minute left.
So 30 seconds.
I'm avoiding the question a little bit by just alluding to that this regulation on AI in the European Union is basically, some people think we need to change copyright law in order to make sure that what AI is allowed to access and not access, kind of like shipping that off. But yeah, so that's a little bit the avoidance of the question, but copyright law is a little bit at the clash of this AI regulation, and there'll be lots of discussion about that.
Jerry, we're down to about 25 seconds, please, to close us out.
So I'll take Frank's question real quick as to AI and examiner judgment. Again, it comes down to human-centered AI. So the idea is empower, augment, not replace. Humans are still in the driver's seat. Humans will be in the driver's seat for as long as my tenure at the PTO lasts, and probably well beyond that. So yeah, human-centered AI, examiners in the driver's seat, APJs in the driver's seat, and AI as a useful tool to sit, to ride shotgun with them as they embark upon their adjudications.
Well
Thank
said.
you, Jerry. Thank you, Armando. Thank you, Daniel.